by congratulating you, as well as your country, Argentina, and its delegation upon your accession to the presidency of this council for this month. President, allow me to start with a number of questions. How long are we going to keep simply meeting here to make statements which express concern, condemnation, refusal of Israel's continued occupation of Arab territories in Palestine, in the Golan, and the South Lebanon? This occupation, unprecedented occupation in its length, violation of international law, its policy of settlements, which have all destroyed any glimmer of hope of building the Palestinian state which all of us yearn for, and to seeing global, comprehensive peace prevail. It's always disregarded all the meetings which take place here in this international organization, the resolutions we undertake here. Even though Israel itself was created by a Security Council resolution. So, this disregard by Israel of the United Nations and its ongoing persecution of the Palestinian people and its occupation of Arab land, including, of course, the occupation of the Syrian Golan, is based on the irresponsible backing which is lended by a number of influential member states of this council, both at political as well as military and media levels. President, some claim, and they do this, whether it be in the morning, in the afternoon, or at night, that they're concerned with the Palestinian people and Syria. And their fallacious words are now known to all, especially concerning the condemnation of the Israeli occupation of the Syrian Golan, which has been occupied since 1967. It almost leads us to believe that reacquiring the Syrian Golan is not part of our natural rights. We're almost led to believe that this is not Syrian-occupied land, or that Syrians who are suffering under Israeli occupation aren't members of the Syrian people as a whole. In this forum, we will always praise international human rights and international law, but where are those same people when it comes to putting an end to the Israeli settlement campaigns, as well as the suffering of Syrian citizens, which have been going on now for close to half a century? Where are their noble words and noble intentions when these citizens suffer from policies of repression, of racial discrimination, torture, when they're deprived of their natural resources, including, of course, oil, gas, and water? President, the most recent developments in the region, which have pushed UNDOF to evacuate some of its positions on a provisional basis, are not just coincidence, no. They have come at the right time to confirm, to reaffirm what we had warned against, that the support lent by certain regimes, including Israel, to Al-Qaeda-related groups in the area of separation is not only a flagrant violation of the disengagement agreement and, of course, of international law, as well as all of the Security Council's resolutions, but it also exposes the United Nations forces to a threat and makes them unable to discharge their mandate. And this is what happened when these terrorist groups repeatedly kidnapped peacekeepers, members of UNDOF, or have fired against these soldiers or indeed their positions, which prompted them to evacuate some of these aforementioned positions under the threat of fire. In coordination, or rather should I say, and this under a process of coordination with a regime which sponsors terrorism and which claims that it is a mediator, but it does this to cover the fact that it pays bribes and ransom money to terrorists, and this is inadmissible. What we cannot understand is that every single warning, all information which we had communicated repeatedly to all the parties, the United Nations and others, including Israeli support to terrorist groups, and the fact that Syrian positions were being targeted in a direct way, was all disregarded. But we had shared this and this is done to help these groups to achieve their ends. Or what about the request we had submitted to officially investigate the possible collusion between Qatari intelligence services and the kidnapping of UNDOF peacekeepers, especially those who were members of the Filipino contingents? These terrorist groups continue to act based on their belief, their conviction that the United Nations aren't even going to lift the little finger to intervene, and that Israel will continue to lend them all logistical military support, and that Qatar is going to keep paying millions of dollars in ransom money to release those who have been detained, and this within the framework of something which is nothing more than a masquerade aimed at justifying the financing of the Al-Nusra Front. After the new constraints and limitations imposed upon them after Resolution 2170 regarding the prohibition on the financing of ISIS and the Al-Nusra Front. This doesn't, however, exempt Qatar of its legal responsibility, because this is a flagrant violation of Resolution 2133 of this very Council, which bans the payment of ransom to terrorist outfits. It is high time for the United Nations to come into play, to put an end to the Turco-Saudi collusion aimed at shedding Syrian blood, and which promotes Judaization of Israel, of Jerusalem. We'd like to reaffirm our ongoing position, which backs the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the building of an independent state throughout its whole territory, with Jerusalem as its capital, while guaranteeing the right of refugees to return to their lands, to their homes, in keeping with Resolution 194, dated 1948. This is a non-negotiable right. This is a right which will never disappear or evaporate. This is something which is reaffirmed by international law and United Nations resolutions and all international relevant instruments. Syria condemns the Israeli violence against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. This is yet another new chapter in the overall plot and the overall aggression against the Palestinian people. Israel's continuation of such acts of aggression has exacerbated tension in the region. They have reached an unprecedented level, one which will have very heavy consequences, which of course will not be limited to the region alone. This is why we call upon the United Nations, including the Security Council, to bear their responsibilities by putting an end to the Israeli occupation and to put an end to the barbaric policy of continued aggression, forcing Israel to withdraw from all occupied Arab lands to the line of the 4th June of 1967, in keeping with relevant United Nations resolutions, including 242, 338, and 397 of the Security Council. Mr. President, we're again today witnessing reiterated attempts or repeated attempts by the United States and its allies aimed at killing off the very hope embedded in this discussion, the title of this discussion, the situation in the Middle East, And this is being done to cover the Israeli crimes and its ongoing violations of international law by drawing away attention from these very facts. The policies of these states, headed by the United States, by the UK, by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and others, violate the provisions of the United Nations Charter and the rules of international law by resorting to the use of terrorism and defamation as tools to combat the Syrian state, including through the building, or should I say the creation of training camps for terrorists, for mercenaries, by claiming that this is the moderate opposition. And then they send them into the Syrian interior, crossing the borders of our borders with neighboring countries. And this, of course, is all a violation of all the resolutions of this Council regarding counterterrorism. The statements made by delegations have revealed that the very same states which back terrorism in my country, Syria, are also working to protect Israel, attempting to ensure that it never faces embarrassment and covering up its crimes. The United Nations have not just used the right of veto 61 times to protect Israel and to prolong its occupation of our territories, which suffer under its occupation. No, the United States have even disregarded Security Council resolutions in the past to forge illegal alliances targeting the sovereignty of a great many member states of this organization. These are illegitimate alliances which were forged by the United States and the United Kingdom outside the confines of this Council have resulted in nothing more but violence, destruction, anarchy, and terrorism throughout the world. And this came at the cost of respect for the rules of international law and human rights. I thank you, sir.